welcome to another Inside Lansing, where today's guest is Ken Reynolds, Director of Venue Operations, our first Director of Venue Operations. You might know him as the Communications Director originally, but now you are the Director of Venue Operations. Thank you for being here today.
It's my pleasure. Good to be back.
So let's talk about the role. Director of Venue Operations, what is that role? How did we come to decide, hey, we need that role in the village now, and how did you come into it?
I think the focus or the centerpiece of this is Fox Pointe. You know, when we opened that in 2018, we had a director of Fox Pointe, and that individual, Tony Troncoso, was still with us as our entertainment director, and he runs our concession areas. But what we realized was that as Fox Pointe continued to develop, and then we also have two other venues in our community that we are looking to develop. One is the Lansing Sports Complex up on the north end of town, and then the Ford Hangar at the Lansing Municipal Airport that we are just now in the process of finalizing our usage policy and being able to also have that be a venue. As all three of these kind of began to grow, it was administration's position that we needed to find someone to oversee, you know, the operations of all three. Obviously, Fox Pointe is further along than the other two.
Yes.
But to, I don't want to say primarily focus on Fox Pointe, but to start there and then get these other two up and running as well as venues or destinations where people can rent, have events, and so forth. So that's the need to have someone to oversee that is what created the position. And then there was, you know, application and so forth and interviews. And obviously I've been involved with, you know, pretty much from the ground floor with Fox Pointe, as well as knowing the sports complex and learning a lot about the hangar. So I was able, when I started in this position in December of 22, was able to kind of hit the ground running. I know that's cliche, but did have a working knowledge of all three of these, and it had a very heavy involvement with Fox Pointe. So it just felt like, you know, it was a need for a position that needed somebody in admin to be able to oversee it, and thus that's how we got here.
So now you're leading that position, and are you excited about it? Do you like where the avenues it can lead with not just the village, but also you here in the village as an employee?
Yeah, it's certainly a daunting task because they're only going to get bigger.
Sure.
And one of the things I've talked with, you know, our fellow admin about is the need to grow all levels of these, and that includes staffing, that includes sponsorship.
It's not just
it's
event
not
planning.
just the events, right? It's how do you have the staff, and how do you have the logistics, and how do you have the protocols in place to be able to make sure that when people are wanting to use, you know, basically properties owned by the village, that it's being done legally, it's being done, you know, in a manner that is following through and protecting us from a liability perspective, and also ultimately looking to turn these into profit centers for the village, with revenue being put back in, you know, for the use in the village.
And where does the revenue come from for something like that?
Depends on the venue. You know, for the most part, when we are having a public event at Fox Pointe, for example, we have our concession areas. We are, and well, I know we'll get to this a little bit later, but we are having ticketed events this year, not for the first time, but under a more formal process. And then you have the private rental of any of these venues. So for example, if teams are playing at the Lansing Sports Complex, they're paying us a fee, a rental fee, to use those fields.
So there's a lot of different avenues for revenue to be coming in from these positions.
Yeah, that is certainly our goal, and trying to find, you know, the right price that draws people to, you know, to all of these venues, and also keeps it to where the price doesn't get too high that nobody wants to come, but also that it is worth our time and worth our effort, that we're putting capital and manpower, you know, into these, as well as continuing to maintain. And that's probably one of the biggest line items, is the pure maintenance and upkeep of all three of the venues.
Sure.
Some are much older than others,
Yes.
like the hangar. Some are brand new, but no matter where it's at in age, it definitely needs, you know, the ability to be monitored weekly, monthly, yearly for what is still needed and what do we need to add or increase to each venue.
And I know I talked about revenue, and we're talking now about maintenance. Those are all costs and benefit of. So it's funny that I bring it up, but Wednesday night concerts, the free concerts, those are still staying though, correct?
They are. when we have sat in our developmental meetings, one thing that we have really branded ourselves on so far in these first 3 years of Fox Pointe seasons has been our free Wednesday night concerts. And so the community has been very supportive of those. They look to those to be a midweek kind of a hump day or hump night, shall we say, aspect of the calendar. And more importantly, it allows us to showcase the venue to other people. You know, when we first opened in 2019, we did not know, how broad, how wide is the spectrum going to be on where we draw from. And we know that we're drawing a nice chunk of our audience from Northwest Indiana, certainly from Lansing as well. Now we're targeting, as we move west, trying to get more of the, not western suburbs, but the area due west of us, I-80, Frankfort, Tinley, in that area, getting them to this absolutely beautiful venue. And one way to do that is on Wednesday nights, providing a quality opportunity, for guests to come and enjoy, have good food, have something to drink, see some great talent. And then hopefully as we continue to increase the amount of events that are held there and maybe some of the name recognition of some of those acts, shall we say, if we start to get some bigger draws, that A, we're prepared for that, but B, people also know who we are and where we're at.
Right. And then that brings me into the other concerts that we had talked briefly on, is that you're going to have these new concerts, Friday Night Lights, they call it. And these are the paid concerts, is correct? This is where you need a ticket.
Yes, and this is our first endeavor into kind of an e-ticketing system, like many people are used to seeing for ball games or for concerts at, Soldier Field or, any much bigger venue than ours. But I think the biggest thing that we are looking to do with this is a lot of communities around us are known for certain, weekends. They've got this particular fest or they've got this particular talent show going in a certain weekend of the year. We're trying to establish this Friday Night Lights series as kind of a branded showcase for our venue. And the ticket prices, we've kept this in mind as we've discussed. And so it is only $10 to come in and see two top headlining bands, from this either Northwest Indiana or Chicagoland area. And that's where Tony Troncoso's expertise. He's been in that industry for over 30 years. So he's got a huge Rolodex and is able to find, again, not an opener and a headliner, but two co-headliners that are each playing 90-minute sets. And then the other thing we're looking to do with these is to have some other attractions that are going on the perimeter. Not necessarily food vendors or anything along those lines, but attractions, whether it's a digital photo booth, whether it might be a portable karaoke truck. It might be a little something more because people are paying to come in. And most of those attractions will probably be included in the ticket price. Depending on what we get, we might have one where it's a couple extra bucks, just depending on the budget that we have there. But I think the biggest thing with these is trying to draw some new individuals to our area. And some of the bands, obviously it's 4 Friday Night Lights times 2 bands. So it's 8 bands that are really hot right now and are well known in this area. So getting them to co-headline, we're interested to see A, what we draw, and then B, get our feet wet with the actual purchasing of tickets. You go online and you purchase tickets and they're downloaded to your phone, or you can download them and print them out if someone wants to. You can still buy tickets the day or the night of the show, but again, it will go right to your phone. And now we'll be getting into electronic admissions. We'll be able to keep track of who's there. And I think the biggest thing it's going to give us is some real analytics on where are our customers coming from.
And this will help with the other venues as well once you start the process of building those up even more and more. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you could do the exact same thing, through the creation of any kind of registration for an event. So whether it's charged or you can even set up, free registration. So if someone's coming to a free event, but you want to keep a track on maybe you want to cap it at a certain amount of people, there's a variety of ways to use the software so that even though it doesn't cost the customer or the guest anything, we still are getting that registration data to say where are they coming from, what cities, what zip codes, and that allows us to market and target what we're doing to a more direct audience.
Well, I think it's all very exciting. I mean, these are 3 very important places in town that people often either talk about or visit. and there's a lot that's been put into all these places in terms of, like you say, maintenance or even other departments that help to make these things grow, and people are excited about it. They want to come check it out. So I think it's very exciting to see that. I also think you'd mentioned that people can get involved, like they can rent places out. How might a business or a person, how might they do that? Do they reach out to you?
Yes is a general answer, but depending on which venue you're talking about, at least as of our filming today, the answer is a little bit different. Right now, Fox Pointe, if you go to the foxpointe.org website, one of the tabs is rentals. And there is an application process, and there is a usage policy for people to make sure that what their event is the right fit for Fox Pointe, and that everything from fees to what they can and can't do. And then those applications are reviewed by me and by Tony, depending on what the needs are, to be able to make those be a fit on dates when we obviously aren't having something that is a public event.
Sure.
We're headed there with the Ford hangar as well, but we are finalizing the usage policy because we're dealing with an airport. So
Right.
we have to make sure that,
There's a lot of heavier logistics.
yeah, there's
there.
a lot of do's and don'ts. And the hangar is obviously its own entity, but it's connected to the airport. So just as you said, the pure logistics of it and what they can and can't do is a little more restrictive than it is at Fox Pointe. But for example, like at the hangar, you have a limited amount of parking. And so the parking lots in and around the hangar and in and around the other buildings down by Enterprise Rent-A-Car and so forth have all been resealed and striped. But that finite number of parking spots kind of limits the event that someone can have unless they are willing to, find a shuttle bus and find another site to bring them in from, because there's only one way in and one way out
Right.
of the hangar unless you are flying an airplane. And I don't think most of our guests are. So that's the second, I would say to you that the hangar is right behind it as far as its organization, and will be ready probably within the next 60 to 90 days for a formal, usage policy that people can read and review and find out if it's a match.
That's really
And that
quick.
includes fees.
Yeah.
And then the sports complex is probably the furthest from being rented yet. And we need to get into the travel baseball and softball worlds, and meeting with some of those agencies who have what I call basically, they just have satellite sites. So if they're running a tournament in this Chicagoland area, they may need as many as 12, 15, 16 different sites throughout the week and weekend until they whittle their way down to a few teams that are left. So personally for me, with a lot of background as a former high school baseball coach and so forth, know a lot of those contacts, being able to get those individuals to say, hey, we've got a great piece of property on the north end of our town right off the expressway. We'd be more than happy to have you play games there. We've got 4 fields, 2 Little League size fields, 1 softball field, and 1 regulation diamond, in addition to our volleyball courts, which half of them have just been resurfaced. And that is another area where potentially we could have outdoor leagues, or we could have people, even adult leagues, that are going on, under the lights, which is not something you find a lot anymore. A lot of that is inside.
Correct.
So the complex is, ironically, it's much older than Fox Pointe is, but it's always been run by volunteers and local leagues in town. Village has always owned it. Now the Village has taken over the actual operations from a maintenance perspective, and eventually what will be booking, any entries that are there.
Well, it's great to see, all those different sides of town kind of coming together under your umbrella, that they're being taken care of, that they're being considered to help grow Lansing and help bring people to Lansing in a positive light. I think we're very excited to see it, and I just want to thank you again for giving us a small insight into that and for being on the show today, Ken.
It's my pleasure. Again, you guys do a great service for us, and we genuinely appreciate, especially what you do to help us market these particular venues.
Of course, and thank you again. And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on Inside Lansing.